Okay, so this is the part 4 tutorial, and this is going to be on views, not controllers, which I initially suggested in my last video. And this is because views are more important to front end, and people who are watching these tutorials might want to get up and running with actual HTML for pages rather than setting up complex logic through controllers. So I'm going to cover that first. So jumping into the code from the previous tutorial, to set up the location for where the views are, looking at the Laravel structure, it's in resources and views, and then the user file called blade, which is essentially a modified PHP file. So we're going to duplicate that directory structure in source. So I'm going to create a new folder called resources and a new folder called views. So resources is essentially a front end folder because you store things like templates, style sheets, and JavaScript. And inside this views folder, I'm also going to create a folder called layouts and a folder called pages. So the layouts are essentially the boilerplate code for setting up a page, and then the pages folder have views which will be nested within the layout. This is so that essential parts of the website don't need to be repeated, such as the content inside the head tag, as well as headers and footers. So in order to use these views, we need to actually set up a piece of code similar to the last tutorial where we did routes. So we need to actually load views, and this is going to be load views from. And then because this is in the resources folder and Laravel has a helper for this, we're actually going to create another helper function. So we're just going to call this resource path, again with path as a parameter. And we're going to return this base path. So using the other function that we did in the last tutorial, but we're actually going to pass it in the path with a prefix of resources. So the first parameter of this load views from is just the views folder. So I can just do this resource path and then views. So that will basically mean it's loading views. It will load any view files that live within the layouts and pages subfolders. And then the second parameter is basically a prefix that you can use to specify the location where the view should be loaded from. Because by default Laravel will look for views within the resources views folder from the root, you need to specify a package specific handle. So in this case I'll just use the package name. And if we actually create a new file that we'll use as a layout, and just call this basic.blade.php, we're just going to create a basic HTML page. So just opening in HTML tags, body tags, and then we're actually going to have a div which is going to hold the content of the page. So we're going to call this div content, and we're going to actually use a special keyword for blade, which is yield. which basically injects the page into the layout. So that's the layout done. Now we can move on to the page. So because on the roots file, because I set the URL for that to test, I'm also going to call the page test. So I'm just going to do test.blade.php. And then inside this, first you have to do extends, which basically specifies that you're extending a layout. So starting with this, we're using LWAP, which is the package name, followed by the two colons. This basically specifies that you're using the package handle rather than the regular resource views folder. So it'll be LWAP, and then layouts is the first folder down from views. So I'm going to do layouts, and then a dot to specify we're going a directory down, since the basic blade PHP file lives in the layouts folder. So the next step will be basic. So that declares the layout, and now we have to use section to declare any, because inside the layout we have yield content, which specifies that you can inject content under this handle into the file. We basically need to replicate that, but using the section keyword. So section content, so all I've done here is declare what content will be specific to the page, and this will get injected into the content section of the layout. So now all that I need to do is change the previous code I had in the roots file to point to this view. So this will just be LWAP and then the double colon pages dot test. And if I reload the page now, sorry, I seem to have missed the tag off. On the, you always have to start with section and then end section. Otherwise, the code won't be sure what you're declaring. So if I reload that now, you can see the content, and if I view page source, you can see that the page content, which is the text, has been injected in layout, which is the only thing that has HTML. So that's all that done, and we can now reuse this code to create any web pages we want and stick the HTML in the Blade files and use Laravel Blade syntax for abstracting layouts and pages. So that's it for this tutorial.